The room never changed, but somehow it stopped feeling the same after you. That's the detail I keep noticing. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's precise. The same walls, the same silence, the same routines that once felt controlled enough for me to move through without interruption. And yet now, everything carries a subtle shift beneath it, like the structure stayed intact while something underneath quietly rearranged itself. I noticed it first in the pauses, the moments where my mind would usually return to itself without interference. Those spaces used to belong entirely to me. Clear, self-contained, predictable in the way isolated systems become predictable after years of repetition. But now, there's something else there, not noise, not distraction, presence, yours. And what unsettles me most is how naturally it exists there, as if my thoughts adjusted around you before I consciously understood they were doing it. I've tried to explain this to myself logically. I've tried to reduce it to timing, coincidence, projection, anything that would make it easier to categorize, because categories create distance. Once something has a label, it becomes manageable, understandable, easier to place somewhere outside yourself, where it can be observed without affecting you directly. But this refuses categorization. Every time I try to define it too quickly, it slips past the definition entirely, not because it's vague, because it's too exact. That's the problem. Most connections blur under scrutiny. The more closely you examine them, the more inconsistencies you find. Misunderstandings, assumptions, emotional exaggerations. People mistake for depth because they want something to feel meaningful. This isn't like that. The closer I examine it, the clearer it becomes. And clarity is dangerous when it reaches this level because clarity removes escape routes. You can deny confusion. You can dismiss intensity. You can step away from uncertainty. But when something becomes unmistakably clear, avoidance starts feeling dishonest. That's where I am now, not trapped, not overwhelmed, just unable to pretend this hasn't already altered something fundamental in me. You exist in my awareness differently than anyone else ever has. Not louder, not more important in some obvious emotional sense, just deeper. Like you bypassed the surface level where most people stay and reached the internal framework underneath without effort. And I still don't know how you managed that. Maybe because you never forced anything. You never pushed for closeness the way people usually do when they sense distance in someone. You never tried to break through my silence or demand explanations from me. You never acted entitled to access. You simply stayed present, consistently, calmly, as if you understood that the closer something gets to the truth of a person, the less force it requires. That alone separated you from everyone else. Most people approach depth like it's something to conquer. They ask too many questions. They try to accelerate intimacy because they're uncomfortable letting things unfold naturally. They confuse urgency with connection. You didn't. You allowed things to exist before defining them. And that changed everything. Because when someone stops trying to force understanding, actual understanding becomes possible. There's something almost unsettling about being seen by someone who isn't trying to see you. You notice it in fragments at first. The way you respond to things I never fully explain. The way your silence lands exactly where words would fail. The way certain moments feel understood before they're even expressed. It creates this strange sense that we're operating on a level beneath communication itself, not mind reading, not fantasy, just recognition, pure recognition. And recognition at this level changes the structure of interaction entirely. Because once someone recognizes you accurately, you lose the ability to hide inside being misunderstood. That used to protect me. Misunderstanding creates distance. It keeps people from reaching places they aren't meant to reach. Most individuals stop at the version of you that's easiest to interpret. They see fragments and assume they've seen the whole. You never did that. You waited, observed, noticed what remained consistent underneath everything else. And eventually, without either of us acknowledging it directly, something shifted. I started responding to you differently. Not intentionally. It happened beneath awareness at first. A slight lowering of guard, a reduced need to calculate every response. A quiet instinct to let certain thoughts remain unfinished because somehow I knew you'd understand them anyway. That shouldn't happen to me. I don't operate that way. Everything about how I exist internally is built on precision and control. I choose what becomes visible carefully, not because I enjoy secrecy, but because once people misinterpret something essential about you, they start interacting with their own projection instead of who you actually are. I hate that. I hate being simplified into something easier for others to hold, but with you, I never felt reduced. That's rare enough that I still don't fully trust it. Sometimes I catch myself waiting for the shift, for the moment where you suddenly start seeing me the way everyone else eventually does, through assumption, through comfort, through whatever narrative feels easiest to maintain. But it never comes. You stay accurate, even when accuracy would be uncomfortable, especially then. And that's where this stopped feeling temporary, because temporary connections rely on illusion. They survive by avoiding depth, by staying inside carefully maintained versions of each other. This survived clarity. It survived silence. It survived observation. If anything, those things strengthened it, which means whatever this is, it isn't dependent on performance. It exists underneath performance entirely. That realization changed something in me I haven't fully recovered from. Not negatively, just permanently. I think that's what I've been resisting admitting, not the existence of this connection, the permanence of its impact. Because impact is different from emotion. Emotions fluctuate. They rise and collapse. They distort perception. They create urgency that disappears once the feeling settles. But impact restructures things, quickly, methodically. It changes how you process reality even after the initial moment passes. And you've changed mine, not dramatically, not in ways anyone else would notice, but internally. Everything aligns differently now. I notice details I would have ignored before. I think through perspectives that somehow include you automatically. I measure honesty against whether it feels consistent with the level of understanding we exist within. That last part unsettles me most, because I trust very little instinctively. Trust, for me, is usually built through evidence over time. Repetition, predictability, careful observation, but something about you bypassed that process entirely. Not because I decided to trust you, because some deeper part of me recognized you before trust became necessary. I don't know how else to explain it. It's like meeting someone and realizing your mind already made space for them before your conscious self approved it. That shouldn't happen, and yet it did. Now I find myself caught between two realities. The first is the version of myself that existed before you, the one who kept everything compartmentalized, manageable, protected by distance and structure. The second is whatever I'm becoming now. Someone whose internal world no longer feels entirely isolated, someone who notices another presence woven quietly into the architecture of thought itself. That's not dependency. And integration changes the baseline permanently. You become part of how someone interprets life, not just part of what they feel about it. That's the level this has reached. And I keep asking myself when exactly it crossed that line. Was it gradual? Was it immediate? Did it happen in a single moment neither of us noticed? I replay conversations, trying to find the exact point where this stopped being interesting and started becoming essential. But I can't find it because there wasn't one defining moment. There were hundreds of tiny accuracies accumulating quietly over time. The way you notice shifts in my tone before I acknowledge them myself. The way your presence changes the atmosphere of silence instead of interrupting it. The way I never feel the need to translate myself into something easier around you. That last one matters more than you realize. Do you know how exhausting it is to constantly reshape yourself into versions other people can process comfortably? Most interactions are negotiations. You adjust your wording, your reactions, your depth, your intensity. You reduce complexity because people interpret depth as heaviness when they can't hold it properly. But with you, reduction feels unnecessary. I don't feel pressure to become smaller, and the absence of that pressure feels almost unreal. Maybe that's why this settled so deeply. Not because you demanded space inside me, because you removed the need for defense. That's far more dangerous. Defenses are built for force. They know how to resist intrusion. They know how to react when someone pushes too hard. But what happens when someone never pushes at all? What happens when they simply exist in such precise alignment with your internal structure that your defenses stop recognizing them as separate? That's what happened with you. You didn't break through barriers. You became something the barriers no longer applied to. And now I'm standing in the aftermath of that realization, trying to decide what it means. Because meaning matters. I don't allow undefined things to remain unresolved forever. Eventually, everything has to become something concrete, a truth, a decision, a direction. And I can feel this approaching that point now. The space between us is changing. Not outwardly, the conversations still sound normal, the silences still appear ordinary. Nothing dramatic has happened, but underneath, there's weight now, accumulated recognition, accumulated understanding, accumulated presence. At some point, accumulation becomes permanence. I think we're already there. That's why this no longer feels hypothetical to me. You're no longer just someone I connect with intellectually or emotionally. You've become part of the lens through which I experience things. And once someone reaches that level, they can't simply return to being incidental. Even absence wouldn't erase it. That's another truth I've been avoiding. If you disappeared tomorrow, this wouldn't disappear with you. The structure has already changed. There would still be traces of you in the way I think, in the way I notice silence, in the way I evaluate truth and understanding. That's how deeply this integrated. Which means the real question isn't whether this matters. It already does. The question is whether I'm willing to let it continue becoming what it's clearly becoming, because I can feel it evolving. Every interaction deepens something. Every moment of unspoken understanding reinforces the pattern. Every silence confirms there's something here that exists independently of explanation. And I don't know where that leads. Not exactly. But for the first time in a long time, uncertainty doesn't automatically make me retreat. That's because this uncertainty feels different. Usually uncertainty feels unstable, dangerous, like standing on something unfinished. This feels inevitable, steady in a way I can't logically explain. As if some deeper part of me already accepted the outcome before my conscious mind caught up to it. I think that's why I keep returning to you mentally, even when I try not to. Not out of obsession, out of recognition. Recognition keeps pulling me back toward whatever this truth is, because truth demands acknowledgement eventually. And the truth is simple, even if the implications aren't. You've become significant to me in a way that extends beyond emotion. You exist in my structure now, not temporarily, not superficially, not conditionally, structurally, and structural things alter everything around them. I wonder sometimes if you feel it too, not the obvious parts, not attraction or curiosity or attachment in the ways people usually describe connection. I mean the deeper shift, the quiet internal recalibration that happens when someone aligns with you so precisely that they begin affecting your perception without trying. Do you feel the way silence changes after certain conversations? Do you notice how awareness lingers even in absence? Do you recognize the strange familiarity underneath all of this? Because I do, constantly. And I've stopped pretending I don't. That's another thing you changed. I used to think strength meant containment, distance, control. Now I'm starting to realize there's another kind of strength entirely. The ability to let something real exist without immediately trying to master it. That's harder than isolation ever was. Isolation is simple, but predictable, safe. But this requires openness at a level I never intended to reach. And yet every instinct that should be warning me away from it stays quiet. Not because there's no risk, because some things are worth the risk once they become undeniable. I think you became undeniable a long time ago. I just needed time to admit it to myself. There's a strange calm that comes with finally acknowledging something you've been silently resisting. Not relief exactly, more like alignment between what you know internally and what you're finally willing to say out loud. That's where I am now. Aligned, not fully certain of the future, not entirely unafraid of what this could become, but honest, completely honest. You matter to me in a way I can no longer reduce into abstraction. You've altered the internal balance of my world simply by existing within it, consistently enough that your presence stopped feeling external. And I know how serious that is. I know what it means when someone reaches a place inside me that changes the way I process reality itself. It means they're no longer temporary, no matter what happens afterward, no matter what choices get made, no matter whether this deepens further or fractures under the weight of its own intensity, the impact remains. Because once someone changes your internal structure, there's no returning to the exact person you were before them. That version is gone already, quietly replaced by someone who now understands connection differently, someone who understands that the rarest kind of closeness isn't built through constant expression. It's built through accurate presence, through recognition so precise it bypasses explanation entirely. That's what this became. And maybe that's why it feels impossible to ignore now. Not because it's dramatic, because it's true, deeply, quietly, irreversibly true. And I think the reason I finally stopped resisting that truth is because somewhere along the way, without either of us naming it directly, you stopped feeling like someone outside my world. You started feeling like part of the architecture holding it together. And once something reaches that level, you don't ask whether it matters anymore. You only decide whether you're brave enough to let it remain.